There are moments that happen on ordinary days that the world has no language for. Not earthquakes, not disasters, not the kind of thing that makes the evening news and gets forgotten by morning. I'm talking about something quieter than that. Something that passes in less than a minute on a street corner most people will never visit, witnessed by a handful of people who will carry what they saw for the rest of their lives. I'm talking about the kind of moment that a mother stores in the back of her heart like a wound that never quite heals. And one day when you're old enough, she takes it out and she says, "Sit down. I need to tell you something." This is one of those moments. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon in November, in the kind of cold that doesn't announce itself, just settles in quietly like it owns the place. On the kind of cold that makes the bones of poor people ache in ways that money never has to think about. And it began, the way so many things begin, with a woman who had nothing left to lose, and a young man who had never once been told no. If this story is already finding its way into your heart, please hit the like button and subscribe to Mama Told Me. And drop a comment below telling me where in the world you're watching from. Mama always said kindness travels farther than you think. The Harrington Grand was not the kind of hotel that had to advertise. It sat on the corner of Meridian and Fifth like something that had always been there and always would be. Its limestone facade darkened at the edges from decades of city weather, but no less imperious for it. The doormen wore charcoal coats. The lobby smelled of lilies and something else, something warm and indefinable, the smell of a place where money felt comfortable. Portraits of the Harrington family lined the upper corridors, stern, oil-painted faces going back 4 generations, each one looking out at the world as though they found it slightly beneath them. On the 5th floor, in a corner suite that looked out over the city's skyline, Marcus Harrington was finishing a phone call. He was 31 years old. He had his father's jaw and his mother's eyes, though neither parent would have recognized the way he used them. He had gone to 3 universities, a fact the family's publicist mentioned often, and Marcus himself mentioned rarely, preferring to let people assume it was more. His suits were made to measure. His watch cost more than most families in the city earned in a year. He smelled of something foreign and expensive, the kind of cologne that doesn't announce itself until you've already been standing too close for too long. He ended the call without saying goodbye, a habit that people around him had stopped remarking on, and crossed to the window. Below him, the city moved. Delivery trucks, a school bus, a woman walking 2 dogs too large for her frame. The usual Tuesday circulation of lives that Marcus Harrington had never had occasion to think about. From up here, 5 floors up, behind glass, it looked like something on a screen. Manageable, small, his. He had an afternoon free. His father, Edwin Harrington, 68, chairman of Harrington Capital, the kind of man whose name appeared in newspapers in a certain quiet way that suggested power rather than announcing it, was in meetings until 6. The dinner reservation was at 8. Marcus had 3 hours, and he intended to enjoy them in the particular way of men who have never had to consider the cost of an afternoon. He took the private elevator to the lobby, nodded at the doorman without quite looking at him, and stepped out onto Meridian Street. The cold hit him. He turned up his collar, thought briefly about going back for a heavier coat, decided against it. He was only going 2 blocks to the members' bar at the Greystone Club, and the thought of returning to the suite for any reason felt like an admission of something. He walked. The Anchor Diner sat on the corner of Meridian and Clement, which is to say, it sat 1 block east of the Harrington Grand and on an entirely different planet. It had been there for 40 years. The sign above the door had lost its apostrophe sometime in the 90s, and no one had bothered to replace it. The windows were perpetually fogged in winter, and through them you could see the outline of red vinyl booths, a long Formica counter, a coffee machine that had not been turned off since 2003. It smelled of hash browns and dish soap and something indefinably human. The accumulated warmth of 40 years of people coming in from the cold and being given something hot to drink and being left in peace. Sophia Reyes had worked at the Anchor for 3 years. She was 26. She had a daughter named Camille, who was 4, who went to Mrs. on Patterson's daycare on Clement Street, and who had recently developed the habit of narrating everything she saw in a serious, low voice, as though conducting a nature documentary about her own life. "The child is hungry," Camille would announce. "The child requires crackers." Sophia lived for it. She was not a tall woman. She was the kind of person rooms didn't notice when she entered them, which she had decided at some point in the last few years to treat as a superpower. She noticed everything. She remembered orders without writing them down. She knew which regulars took their coffee black and which ones would be embarrassed if you brought it that way in front of a date. She knew when someone was having a bad day before they sat down. Something in the set of their shoulders, the way they didn't quite look up when they thanked her. Her mother had raised her that way. "Pay attention," her mother used to say, stirring something on a stove in a kitchen that smelled of cumin and oregano and warm tortillas. "The whole world is people telling you who they are if you bother to listen." Her mother was gone now. 2 years ago, a stroke, quick and final. Sophia still reached for her phone sometimes to tell her things. She was behind the counter on that Tuesday afternoon, wiping down the coffee machine with the focused, slightly mechanical efficiency of someone who has done the same motion 10,000 times when she heard it. Not words, not at first, just a sound. Something between a cry and a gasp, coming from outside. She looked up. Through the fogged window, she could see the sidewalk, the usual Tuesday afternoon foot traffic. And then, movement that wasn't right. Something falling, something crumpling. Sophia set down the cloth. She was already moving. She pushed through the door into the cold and stopped. There were 3 people on the sidewalk outside the diner. 2 of them were standing. 1 of them was on the ground. Marcus Harrington, in his charcoal coat and his too expensive watch, stood with his hands loose at his sides and his jaw set in that particular way of young men who have just done something they intend to be unashamed of. Beside him, half a step back, was another man, younger, maybe 25, a friend or an associate, someone who had the look of a person permanently positioned slightly behind Marcus, living in his orbit, borrowing his confidence. He was staring at the ground with an expression Sophia recognized. She had seen it before, on the faces of co-workers who watched something happen and didn't stop it. The look of someone already composing the story they would tell themselves later. There was nothing I could do. It happened so fast. On the ground against the base of the diner wall was an old woman. She was very small. Her coat was a man's coat, dark gray, worn through at the elbows, 3 sizes too large. Beneath it she wore layers. Sophia could see the hems of them. Uneven, different colors. The practical architecture of someone who had learned to carry their warmth with them. Her shoes were mismatched. Her hair was white and sparse, pulled back from her face with something that might once have been a decorative clip and was now just a function. She had a canvas bag beside her, the kind with the woven handles, the kind that grocery stores gave away at checkout 20 years ago, and that had somehow outlasted everything else. She was not unconscious. She was trying to get up. Her hands were pressed flat against the cold pavement, trembling with the effort, and she was not making a sound, which was somehow the part that was most difficult to look at. She had been hit. Sophia could see it. A man's shoe had made contact with something. The bag had been kicked, its contents scattered. An orange, a folded piece of paper, a small Ziploc bag with something inside it, a wool hat. She was trying to gather them. She was trying to get up. And she was not crying, not appealing to anyone, not asking for anything. She was simply trying to get herself off the ground, the way a person does when they have learned not to expect help. Marcus Harrington said, "It's," without looking at the old woman. "Shouldn't have been in the middle of the walkway." The other man said nothing. Sophia stood in the diner doorway for exactly 2 seconds. Later, she would not be able to explain what happened in those 2 seconds. There was no decision. There was only the movement that followed it. She walked to the old woman and crouched down beside her. "Here," she said, just the one word, quiet, not asking permission. The old woman looked at her. Her eyes were extraordinary. That was the thing Sophia would remember first when she thought about this day. Dark and very still, and looking at Sophia with an expression that wasn't gratitude and wasn't surprise, and wasn't the lost, unfocused look of someone unwell. It was recognition, not of Sophia specifically, but of something about the gesture. and as though she had been waiting a very long time for someone to simply crouch down. And here was that person, and that was enough. Sophia helped her up. It took longer than it should have. The woman was stiff. The cold, the fall, the general weight of a body that had been carrying too much for too long. Sophia got her arm under the woman's arm. She kept her voice low and practical, the same voice she used with Camille when her daughter woke from a nightmare. It's okay. I've got you. Slow, slow. She gathered the scattered items from the pavement. The orange, the folded paper, the hat, the small Ziploc bag. She saw now that it contained medication, a few loose white tablets, the canvas bag itself. She handed them back without comment, without inventory, without the particular kind of charity that catalogs what it's giving. Marcus Harrington had watched this entire proceeding with an expression of flat impatience. She was in the way, he said again, directing this at no one in particular, at the air perhaps, at the principle of the thing. People need to watch where they are. Sophia looked at him for the first time. She was not a woman who frightened easily. She had grown up in a neighborhood that didn't have the budget for fear, and she had been working double shifts in a diner since she was 17, and she had a 4-year-old at home. And mothers of 4-year-olds develop a particular relationship with the concept of someone larger than them, thinking they are in charge. She looked at Marcus Harrington the way she looked at a pan that had been left too long on the heat, directly without drama, and with the calm assessment of someone who knows exactly what the damage is. She didn't speak to him. She turned back to the old woman. Come inside, she said. Come in and sit down. The old woman looked at the diner, then back at Sophia. I don't want to cause... You're not causing anything, Sophia said. Come in. Her name, she said, was Ada. Just Ada. No surname offered, and Sophia didn't ask. People who needed last names to be real had never worked a shift behind a diner counter. Sophia settled her in the corner booth, the one furthest from the door, warmest, where the radiator ran closest to the wall. She brought coffee without asking. Then a bowl of soup because it was there. Because it was Tuesday, and on Tuesdays, the cook made a white bean and kale that was better than anything on the menu. She put it in front of Ada and sat down across from her. You don't have to, Ada began. I know I don't, Sophia said. Eat. Ada ate. She ate with a carefulness that was not delicacy but something else. The carefulness of a person who had learned not to take food for granted, who knew that the speed of eating and the pace of food available were not always in alignment, who had perhaps developed the habit of eating slowly so that the pleasure of it lasted longer. She held the spoon properly. Her hands, when Sophia looked at them more closely, were not the hands of someone who had always been where she was. They were articulate hands, long-fingered. The nails were short and clean. On the right hand, on the ring finger, had a slight indentation where a ring had been worn for many years and had been removed not long enough ago for the skin to fully forget it. Sophia noticed these things. She always noticed things. She got up to serve 2 other tables. She refilled coffees, delivered a slice of pie, made the usual small exchanges that she could do now in her sleep. And when she came back to the corner booth, Ada was still there, not finishing the soup, but sitting with her hands around the coffee mug, looking out the window at the street with an expression that was very hard to name. Not lost, not sad exactly. Something more specific than sad. The expression of someone watching a city they used to know, noticing what has changed and what hasn't, calculating the distance between where they are and where they expected to be. Sophia sat down again. She had 12 minutes before the after-school rush. Did he hurt you? She said. That man. Ada looked back from the window. Not seriously. A pause. It was the bag. He walked into it. He decided it was my fault. It wasn't. No. Ada looked down at the coffee mug. It wasn't. Something in her voice, not bitterness, not the freshly minted outrage of someone newly wronged, but something older. Something that had been processed and settled and was now simply a fact about the world. The way gravity is a fact, the way winter is a fact. She said it the way a person says a thing they have known for a long time and have made a particular peace with. No, it wasn't. And then moves on. Sophia watched her. Where are you staying? She said. A very slight pause. The kind of pause that contains a whole accounting happening behind the eyes. I have arrangements, Ada said. Sophia knew what that meant. She had heard it before, in her neighborhood, in her mother's kitchen, from the women who came to her mother's church on Sunday mornings with their best shoes on and their pride intact and their arrangements that were really the margins of the city, the places that weren't quite places, shelters with curfews, church halls that allowed sleeping on Tuesday and Thursday only, the particular exhausting algebra of surviving a city that had not designed itself with you in mind. It's going to be 8 degrees tonight, Sophia said. I know. Do your arrangements account for that? Ada looked at her with those dark, still eyes, and for a moment, just a moment, something moved in them. Not weakness, not appeal, something that was almost amusement, but the kind of amusement that lives next door to heartbreak. The expression of a woman who has not been asked a direct practical question by someone who actually wanted to know the answer in quite some time. I'll manage, Ada said. I've been managing. I know, Sophia said. That's not the same thing. Another silence. Outside, a delivery truck went by. The radiator knocked. From the kitchen, the cook turned up something on the radio, then turned it back down. How long? Sophia said. How long what? How long have you been managing? Ada looked at her hands. She was quiet for long enough that Sophia thought she wasn't going to answer. Then, 2 years and 4 months. But the last 3 months have been... She stopped. She chose another word. We're harder. Because of winter. Because of several things. Sophia looked at her. At the coat 3 sizes too large. At the canvas bag that held everything. At the hands that still remembered holding something better than what they held now. At the face that still held somewhere in the architecture of it, in the line of the jaw, in the set of the brow, in the precise, self-possessed way she occupied space even in a vinyl booth in a 40-year-old diner. The ghost of someone who had once moved through the world very differently. She made a decision. It wasn't, as she would tell her daughter years later, a heroic decision. It didn't feel like anything so grand. It felt like the only reasonable next step when you are paying attention and you know what you're seeing. You can't stay here tonight, Sophia said. The owner locks up at 10 and I don't have a key, but I have a couch. My daughter is 4 and she wakes up early and the apartment smells like crayons, but it's warm and there's a lock on the door. Ada looked at her. Sophia looked back. I'm not asking anything, Sophia said. You don't have to tell me anything. You can leave in the morning and I'll never see you again if that's what you want. But tonight is going to be 8 degrees. A very long silence. Long enough that the 2 women at the booth by the window flagged Sophia down for the check. And Sophia held up a finger and mouthed 1 minute, and they nodded, and she stayed where she was. Finally, Ada said, You don't know me. I know enough, Sophia said. How? Sophia thought about it. She thought about her mother, stirring something on a stove. You're saying, the whole world is people telling you who they are. She thought about the hands on the pavement, not asking for help. She thought about the eyes that looked at a city with the particular grief of someone who used to be part of it differently. You didn't ask for help, Sophia said, even when you needed it. You were trying to get yourself up off the ground. Ada was quiet. That tells me something, Sophia said. Another pause. Then Ada looked down at her coffee mug again, then back up. All right, she said very quietly. The way a woman agrees to something when she has run out of the energy to refuse what is being offered in good faith, and when some part of her, some small, still surviving part of her, recognizes that refusal would not be dignity, but something else. All right. Sophia's shift ended at 6. Before she left, she used the phone in the back office. Her data was almost gone, and she was trying to preserve it until payday, to call her neighbor, Mrs. Okafor, who watched Camille on the evenings Sophia worked late. She explained she'd be bringing someone home. Mrs. Okafor said, Of course, bring extra soup if there is any, and hung up before Sophia could say thank you, which was exactly like her. She counted her tips in the staff bathroom. She had $43. She had $11 in change in her account until Friday. She owed Mrs. Okafor $20 for the last 2 watch sessions. She needed to buy Camille's asthma inhaler refill by Thursday. The pharmacy had called twice. She had been planning to buy groceries tomorrow with the 43, to stretch them across 3 days until her paycheck processed. She stood in the bathroom looking at the money. Then she folded it and put it in her pocket and went back out to the counter. She asked the cook for a takeout container of the white bean soup. He said, of course, without asking why, and made 2 coffees to go, and went to the corner booth where Ada was sitting with her eyes on the window again, watching the street fill with the 6 o'clock dark, the headlights, the rush of people going home to places they expected to arrive at. Ready? Sophia said. Ada looked at her, at the soup container, at the 2 coffees, at this 26-year-old woman in a diner apron who had absolutely no reason to do any of this. She said, "You didn't have to." "I know," Sophia said. "Let's go." The apartment on Clement Street was small in the particular way of apartments whose inhabitants have decided that small doesn't mean empty. There were Camille's drawings on the refrigerator, horses mostly, and what appeared to be a recurring character named the Angry Bird, who featured in an ongoing saga Sophia had stopped trying to follow. There was a bookshelf made of crates that held paperbacks with broken spines, and a collection of Camille's picture books and 3 ceramic mugs of the kind people buy in tourist shops and forget they bought until they're unpacking a new apartment. There was a rug over the worst part of the floor. There were string lights along the top of the window that Sophia had put up 2 Christmases ago and hadn't taken down because Camille loved them, and because Sophia, if she was honest, he loved them too. The way they made the room feel inhabited rather than just occupied. It smelled, as advertised, of crayons, and of the lavender soap that Camille insisted on because she had seen someone use it on a cartoon she loved and had transferred her devotion to the smell completely. Camille herself was already in pajamas when they arrived, sitting on Mrs. Okafor's knee in the armchair by the television with the focused seriousness of a very small person approaching bedtime with maximum resistance. She looked at Ada with the frank, uncalibrated assessment of a 4-year-old. The kind of look that has no guile in it, no social filtering, just pure observation. "Who are you?" Camille said. "Camille," Sophia began. "My name is Ada," Ada said. She crouched down to Camille's level. It cost her something. Sophia could see the stiffness in her knees, the careful way she settled. But she did it unhurriedly, so that she and Camille were at the same height. "What's yours?" "Camille Lorena Reyes," Camille said, with the full authority of all 4 years. "But the Angry Bird calls me Captain." Ada considered this with complete seriousness. "That seems right," she said. Camille studied her for another moment. Then, apparently satisfied with whatever she had found, she slid off Mrs. Okafor's knee and went to get her horses to show someone new. Mrs. Okafor caught Sophia's eye over Ada's head as the old woman straightened carefully back to standing. Mrs. Okafor raised one eyebrow, just slightly, the particular eyebrow raise of a woman who notices things and chooses her questions carefully. Sophia shook her head, the small shake that meant later. Not now. Mrs. Okafor nodded, accepted a container of soup, and let herself out. They ate at the kitchen table. Soup heated on the stove, bread from the freezer toasted in the oven. Camille ate half a bowl and then fell asleep with her head on her arm, in the way of small children who negotiate with sleep as long as possible and then surrender entirely. Sophia carried her to bed. When she came back out, Ada was standing at the kitchen window, looking at the street below. The string lights were on. The radiator ticked. Outside, the temperature had dropped to 7 degrees. Ada had her hands wrapped around her mug, and she was looking at the lights from the building across the way, the lit squares of other people's windows, the particular grammar of a city at night that says, "People live here. Our people sleep here. People are warm here." She said without turning, "Your daughter is extraordinary." "I know," Sophia said. "She thinks so too." A small sound from Ada, almost a laugh but softer, smaller, the sound of someone who has not found something funny in a while, and whose laugh therefore comes out more cautious than it used to, careful with itself, like a foot testing ice. Sophia sat down at the table. She put her hands around her own mug. "You don't have to tell me anything," she said. "I mean that." Ada turned from the window. She looked at Sophia for a long moment. Then she came back to the table and sat down across from her. She looked at her hands. She said, I was, I had a different life before. I know, Sophia said. How did you know that? The ring, Sophia said. Antara, the mark where it was. Ada looked at her finger. 41 years, she said. He died 3 years ago. Sophia waited. And after he died, Ada said slowly, in the way of someone choosing words with the particular care of a person who has said a thing many times in their own head, but never yet out loud to someone sitting across a kitchen table, looking at them, not going anywhere. After he died, things went wrong, slowly and then quickly, the way things do. She paused. I had a son. Have a son. She corrected herself with the precision of someone who believes in the difference. He is, another pause, longer. He became someone I didn't raise him to be. Sophia did not ask the question that was there. Ada looked up. His name is Edwin, she said, and something in the way she said it, the flatness of it, the weight of it, yet the particular way a mother says a child's name when there is no warmth left in the saying of it, but cannot quite strip the recognition out either. The bare, stripped acknowledgement. This is the name. This is my son. He exists. Something in that made Sophia go very still. She thought about the man on the sidewalk, the other one, the one who had spoken first, who had said shouldn't have been in the middle of the walkway, with the absolute confidence of someone who had never, not once in his 30-some years, been told that he was wrong. She thought about the way he had looked at Ada on the ground, and the way he had not looked at Ada. She thought about the name. She didn't say anything. Not yet. She wasn't sure. Hammered, she had learned from her mother, from years of watching her mother move through the world with that particular patient attention, that the moment of knowing and the moment of speaking were not the same moment, and that the distance between them mattered. You must be tired, Sophia said instead. The couch is made up. There are extra blankets in the closet. Second shelf, the blue ones are warmest. Ada looked at her, a long look, the kind of look that sees something more than is being said and knows it and accepts the grace of it. Thank you, she said, quiet, without theater. The way a person says thank you when they mean it as precisely as possible, when they want the word to carry exactly the weight it has and no more. Tomorrow, Sophia said. I don't work until noon. If you want coffee, I'm up at 6. Ada nodded. She stood. She gathered her canvas bag. She moved through the small apartment with a careful attention to the space, not disturbing the horses on Camille's shelf, not moving the drawing that had fallen off the refrigerator door and lay on the floor beside it. She moved like a woman who had lived in other people's spaces and knew how to be in them without imprinting. At the door of the living room, she stopped. She didn't turn around. She said, the man today, the younger one. A pause. He wasn't alone. Sophia kept her voice even. No, she said. There was another one, younger. That younger one, Ada said, still not turning, still looking at the string lights, the crayon drawings, the sleeping small person shapes in the air of the apartment, is Marcus. A silence. And Edwin, Ada said, is his father. She went to the couch. She lay down. She pulled the afghan that Sophia had folded over the back of the couch over herself, and she went still. And Sophia sat at the kitchen table for a long time after that, long after the sound of Ada's breathing changed and deepened, long after the building across the street went mostly dark, long after the temperature outside dropped to 6 degrees and the radiator clicked and ticked its patient way through the night. She sat and she thought about what it meant that the man who had kicked an old woman's bag and left her on the pavement without looking back was the son of a man named Edwin Harrington. She thought about what it meant that Ada, who slept now on her couch, who had eaten her soup and said her daughter was extraordinary, who had a ring mark on her finger from 41 years, in a canvas bag that held everything. She thought about what it meant that Ada had given no last name, had offered no explanation, had simply said, he is someone I didn't raise him to be. And she thought about her mother stirring something on a stove, saying, pay attention. The whole world is people telling you who they are. She had been paying attention for 3 years and 26 years and her whole life, which amounted to the same thing. She was paying attention now. Sophia woke at 5:47, 13 minutes before her alarm. This was not unusual. She had not needed an alarm since Camille was born. Motherhood had done something precise and permanent to the way she slept. Not badly, not poorly, but lightly near the surface, with one ear always open for the particular pitch of a 4-year-old's cough or cry, or the sound of small feet on the floor at 3 a.m. finding the bathroom. She woke now the way she always woke, completely all at once, like a lamp switched on. She lay still for a moment in the dark, and then she remembered. She got up quietly, padded to the kitchen doorway, and looked into the living room. Ada was awake too. She was sitting upright on the couch with the blue Afghan across her lap and her hands folded over it, looking at the string light Sophia had left on the lowest setting, a habit from Camille's infant months. That soft, continuous amber glow, retained now because some comforts outlast their original reasons. Ada sat in it the way a person sits in something they had forgotten the feeling of, not luxuriating, not performing gratitude, just present in the warmth, in the quiet, in the particular suspended stillness of very early morning before the city remembers itself. She didn't look up when Sophia came in, but she said, "You're up early." "So are you," Sophia said. "I've been waking at 5 for 40 years. Habit doesn't care what the circumstances are." Sophia went to the kitchen and started the coffee. She could hear Ada moving, the small, careful sounds of a person making themselves presentable without a mirror, folding the Afghan, smoothing things. When Sophia came back with 2 mugs, Ada was sitting with her hands in her lap and her back straight and her hair combed as neatly as it would go, and she had the look of a woman who has decided that whatever this day holds, she will face it with her spine upright. They sat at the kitchen table. Outside, the sky was the specific dark blue of 6 in the morning in November. Not quite night, not quite day, the city still deciding. Sophia drank her coffee. Ada drank hers. For a while, neither of them said anything, and the silence was not uncomfortable. It was the silence of 2 people who have already exchanged something real and are now simply occupying the same space without needing to perform conversation over it. Then Ada said, "You haven't asked." "No," Sophia said. "Why not?" Sophia thought about it. "Because you'll tell me what you want to tell me when you want to tell it, and because," she paused, wrapping both hands around the mug, "because I didn't bring you here to get a story. I brought you here because it was 8 degrees. Ada looked at her, the dark, still eyes. The expression that was not quite amusement, and not quite grief, and not quite gratitude, but held something from each of them. "I was a teacher," Ada said, "before everything else. I taught secondary school mathematics in a neighborhood called Oldport, on the south side, for 11 years. I think," a small pause, a careful choice of words, "I think I was a good teacher." "I think you probably were," Sophia said. "Edwin was my student." Ada said it simply, flatly. "The way you say a thing when the saying of it has lost its power to shock you, because you have lived inside it too long. He was 17. He was—" She stopped, looked at the window, at the darkness outside becoming something lighter. "He was the most brilliant student I had ever taught. Not the most gifted at mathematics specifically, but the most hungry. And that is the word. He wanted things with an intensity that was almost frightening in a child. He wanted to understand how things worked. All things. The world. Money. Power. How one thing led to another." She paused again. "I recognized it because I had been like that when I was young. When I was still young enough to believe that hunger was enough." Sophia listened. She had the particular quality, which she had not learned but been born with, of making listening feel like a presence, of making it clear, without any gesture or word, that what she was hearing was being received fully, that it would not be dropped or dismissed or moved past too quickly. "He came to my classroom after school," Ada continued, "for 2 years. We worked on problems, not just mathematics, on thinking, on the structure of arguments. It's on how to see a problem from the angle it was hiding from you." A very small smile, brief and complicated. When he graduated, he had a full scholarship to the university. He wrote me a letter. It said, "You showed me how to think. I will not forget it." She was quiet for a moment. He married at 32, a woman named Patricia, who was kind and quite beautiful, and who looked at Edwin the way people look at things they're not entirely sure they understand, but have decided to love anyway. They had Marcus. They had, she stopped. They had the life that Edwin had always intended to build. And you, Sophia said. I had retired by then. My husband George had died. My first husband, the one before, she stopped herself, reconsidered, started differently. George left me comfortable, not wealthy, comfortable. We had a house. I had my pension. I had my garden. A pause. I was content. I had lived a full life. I had taught many students. Edwin was my, she chose the word carefully, my success story, the one I carried, the one I mentioned sometimes when people asked about teaching. And then something changed, Sophia said. And then Edwin called me, Ada said. 8 years ago now, he said, I'm in trouble. Not legal trouble, financial trouble. The kind of trouble where everything can go wrong very quickly if I don't do something in the next 30 days. He had overextended. He had made a bet on something that had not paid out. He needed, she stopped. He needed capital, real capital. More than the banks would lend him at that moment. He was short by a very specific amount. Sophia was very still. I had the house, Ada said. George had paid the mortgage down to almost nothing before he died. It was worth, she paused and the number she named was quiet but significant. Considerably more than I needed to live on. I had savings. I had the pension. She looked at her hands. I was 71 years old. I didn't need the money. I thought, what are possessions for at 71, if not to give to someone who needs them while you're still here to see them received? The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, the first gray light was beginning. Down the hall, Camille sighed deeply in her sleep, the whole-body sigh of a 4-year-old who is having a very involved dream. I gave him what he needed, Ada said. Everything he needed, and a little more, because he was my student, and because I was proud of him, and because I believed, she stopped. And the word believed sat in the air between them with the particular heaviness of words that have been proven wrong by time. I believed that it was the right thing, and that he would repay me when he could. Did he sign anything? Sophia said, her voice careful, practical. The voice of someone who works for a living and knows what signed things mean and what their absence means. Ada looked at her. He was my student, Ada said. The sentence was its own answer. The sentence was a 40-year mistake contained in 6 words. Sophia looked down at her coffee. The repayment was always, Ada moved her hand slightly, a small gesture of postponement, of perpetual future. Coming. There was always a reason it hadn't arrived yet, a complication, a reinvestment, a restructuring that would make it possible to return far more than had been borrowed, just not yet. Always not yet. She paused. I was patient because I trusted him. And then I was patient because I was afraid of what it meant if I stopped trusting him. And then, and this is the part that is most difficult to say, and then I was patient because he had stopped taking my calls. Outside, a garbage truck went by, slow and grinding, the sound of the ordinary world going about its business. When I could no longer reach him through normal channels and went to his office, Ada's voice changed, just slightly, something tightening in it, something that had been processed and resolved, but still cost something to say aloud. I was told by a young woman at a very nice desk that Mr. Harrington was unavailable, that his schedule was managed through his office, that if I wished to submit a request for a meeting, I could leave my details. A pause. I left my details. No one called. You went back, Sophia said. It was not a question. Several times, Ada said, and then once to the house in Greystone, where Patricia opened the door and looked at me with an expression I had not expected. Not hostility, something worse. Pity. The particular pity of a woman who has been told a version of a story and believes it. She paused. She said Edwin wasn't home. She said he had spoken to his lawyers about the matter. She said she was sorry. Sophia looked at her. What matter had he spoken to his lawyers about? Ada's mouth moved very slightly, in something that was not a smile. He had spoken to his lawyers about the fact that his elderly former teacher had become, she chose the words with the precision of someone quoting, confused about the nature of a gift that had been given freely and was now misrepresenting it as a loan. The kitchen was absolutely silent. I had no documentation, Ada said. I had a letter from 8 years ago saying he would not forget what I had done for him. I had my own memory and my own conscience. She stopped. I had nothing, in the language that lawyers speak. Sophia said nothing. She was holding her coffee mug with both hands, and her knuckles were slightly white, and she was not saying anything, because there was nothing to say, and because some things needed to be heard completely before anything could be placed alongside them. The house sold, Ada said. Oh, the process of the house selling, the proceedings, the lawyers, all of it, took what remained of my savings. I had my pension. I had Patricia's pity. I had a letter that meant nothing to anyone. A long pause. I was 73 years old, and I had, in the space of 2 years, become someone I had not been since I was 22 and new to the city and sleeping on my cousin's floor. She looked out the window. You get used to things faster than you expect to. Both kinds of things. The comfort and the absence of it. Camille woke at 6:47, which was early even for her, and came to the kitchen doorway in her pajamas, with the serious expression of someone who has just remembered something important. Ada, she said, looking directly at Ada, do you know about horses? Ada looked at her. Some, she said. What specifically do you want to know? Camille's face arranged itself into the expression of someone conducting an interview for a position of significance. Do they sleep standing up? They can, Ada said, but they also lie down to dream. Camille absorbed this. How do you know when they're dreaming? Their legs move, Ada said, and their eyelids. Camille considered this for a long, waited moment. Then she went and got the horses from her room and brought them to the kitchen table and arranged them in front of Ada. And Ada looked at each one and named the color, and Camille corrected her on 2 of them with gentle authority, and the morning continued. If this story has found its way to you, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story from Mama Told Me. Your support is what keeps these stories alive, and more of them coming your way. Sophia left for work at 11:30. She had called Mrs. Okafor, who agreed to take Camille for the afternoon. No problem. She was making rice anyway. Sophia had left Ada with the spare key, with the television remote, with strict instructions that there was bread in the freezer and soup from last night in the pot, and she was not to go outside before Sophia got back because the temperature still hadn't risen above freezing, and she did not have the right shoes. Ada had listened to all of this with the expression of a 74-year-old woman listening to someone considerably younger give her instructions she had not asked for. Then she said, I've been managing myself for quite some time. I know, Sophia said, so humor me. She walked to the anchor with her coat collar up and her mind moving. The morning's conversation had settled into her the way important things settle, not loudly, not with urgency, but deeply, taking up residence in the back of the thinking where the real processing happens without announcement. She thought about what it meant to give everything you had to someone who had said, I will not forget, and to be forgotten. She thought about Edwin Harrington, whom she had never met, and his lawyers and his wife's pity, and the particular cruelty of someone who does not need to be overtly vicious because the legal system is cruel enough on their behalf. She thought about Marcus, his coat, his watch, the flat, unconcerned way he had said she was in the way. She had not told Ada yet that she recognized the name, and that the Marcus who had left Ada on the pavement on Meridian Street was, in all probability, the same Marcus who was Edwin Harrington's son. That Ada, reaching for an orange on the cold November pavement outside a diner, had been knocked down by her own grandson. She had not said it because Ada had not asked, and because some things needed to be said in the right order at the right time, and because Sophia had the particular patience of a woman who pays attention, Who knows that the moment of knowing and the moment of speaking are not the same moment, and that the distance between them is where wisdom lives. The anchor at lunchtime was the closest thing Sophia knew to controlled chaos with good intentions. The after-school and before-school adjacent crowd had cleared. The lunch rush had landed. She moved through it the way she always moved through it, quickly and without drama, carrying four things at once, remembering who had asked for no onion without checking the ticket, calling the cook by his actual name, which was Gerald and not Jerry, which he had told people 11 times. She was clearing a table near the window at 12:40 when she looked up and saw the car. It was a black car, not unusual on Meridian Street, which was a commercial street with hotels and the Greystone Club and the kind of businesses that ferried their clients in black cars. But this one had stopped directly in front of the diner, and the person who got out of the back was Marcus Harrington. He was alone today, or mostly alone. The driver stayed in the car. He stood on the sidewalk and looked at the diner with the expression of someone who has found themselves somewhere beneath their expectations and is deciding whether to proceed. He was wearing a different coat, heavier, better, the kind that managed cold without acknowledging it. He was looking at the window where Sophia stood. Sophia kept clearing the table. He came in. The bell above the door announced him. He stood in the doorway for a moment, the particular stillness of a man who expects space to be made for him and is waiting for it to be made. When it wasn't made because everyone in the anchor was already eating and not paying attention to doorways, he moved to the counter and sat down. Sophia brought him a menu. She placed it in front of him and said, "Be right with you," the same way she said it to everyone, which is to say without any particular inflection and with her eyes already on the next thing. "Excuse me," he said. She looked at him. He had the look she had seen the previous day, the jaw set, the mild expression that was not quite arrogant and not quite unaware, the look of a man who has been told by his entire life that he occupies the center of things and has come to take it as a point of fact rather than a position. Up close, he looked younger than 31. He also looked like someone's idea of power rather than like power itself. Like he was wearing it very well, but that the wearing required effort. "Yesterday," he said, "you were outside when there was a situation." Sophia said, "What can I get you?" A very slight pause. He was not accustomed to being redirected. "I wanted to say—" He paused again, recalibrating. "The woman, is she all right?" Sophia looked at him. She let the silence go slightly longer than was comfortable. "Coffee?" she said. Something moved in his face. Not anger, not yet. Something that was trying to decide what it was. "I'm asking if she's all right," he said. "I'd like to know." "Why?" Sophia said. This time the pause was his. It was a more genuine pause than the others. Something actually being considered, rather than simply the rhythm of a conversation expecting deference and not finding it. "My father saw what happened," Marcus said. "From the hotel." Sophia said nothing. Marcus stopped. He looked down at the counter, the first look she had seen from him that was not composed. He was not pleased. Sophia put 2 cups on the counter and poured coffee into both of them. She pushed one toward Marcus and kept one for herself, because her feet hurt and she had been on them since 11:30 and she was allowed. "Your father," she said. "Edwin Harrington," Marcus said. "You may know the name." She did know the name. She knew it the way you know the names of buildings. The Harrington Center on Fifth Avenue, the Harrington Foundation for Educational Excellence, the wing of the Children's Hospital that bore the family name in letters 18 inches high. She knew it the way people who live in cities know the names of the people who own them, as landscape rather than person, as weather rather than choice. "What does your father want?" Sophia said. "He wants to know if there's anything that can be done for the woman, medically, or—" Marcus stopped again on the word that was coming, which was financially, and something about it made him stop. Some very small remaining instinct for the fact that the word was not good. He said instead, "He wants to help." Sophia looked at him, the patient look that her mother had passed down to her like a physical trait. The look that did not rush, did not perform, not performing. Just looked. "Do you know her name?" she said. No. Do you know anything about her? She was, he shifted slightly, begging on the street. She wasn't begging, Sophia said. She was walking. You walked into her bag. The jaw set again. I don't need. I'm not correcting you to be difficult, Sophia said. I'm correcting you because you got it wrong, and it matters that you know that. A long pause. The diner moved around them, the sound of the kitchen, the low conversation of the other tables. Gerald calling a number. Marcus Harrington sat at the counter of the Anchor Diner on Clement Street and looked at a 26-year-old waitress who was not performing anything for him, and something in the look he gave her shifted, very slightly, in a way that she could not quite name but recognize the type of. The expression of someone who has not been spoken to straightforwardly in a very long time. Is she all right? He said again. And this time the asking was different, not composed, not managed. Sophia looked at him for a long moment. Then she picked up her coffee and went to take an order from table 4. He was still there when she came back. He had drunk most of the coffee. He had not taken out his phone, which was unusual for men who sat alone in places they had not expected to sit. They usually reach for the phone the way people reach for armor. He had not taken it out. She has somewhere to stay, Sophia said. She's safe. He looked up. Something moved in him. Something that could, if you were being generous, be called relief. She was not certain she was ready to be that generous, but she noted it. You took her in, he said. I did. He looked at her, looked down at the counter, looked at his hands. They were, she noticed, his grandmother's hands in reverse, the same long fingers, the same articulation. She had not made the connection in the previous day's chaos, but she made it now because she was paying attention, because she always paid attention. She had not said it yet, but she was still carrying it. The name Ada had given, Edwin, Marcus, the full weight of it. She was carrying it the way you carry something fragile, carefully with both hands, waiting for the right surface to set it down. Tell me what your father actually wants, she said. Not the version for strangers. He looked at her sharply. I'm not a stranger, she said. I'm the person who picked her up off the pavement. That's a different category. He was quiet for a long moment. Outside, a bus went by, its wheels on the slush left from the previous night's freeze. Gerald called another number. Someone at table 6 laughed at something, sudden and loud. He wants, Marcus started. Then differently. My father grew up with nothing. Really nothing. Not the polished version of it. He was this part of the city, actually. He, not far from here. He said it with a complicated expression. The expression of someone who has been told a story so many times that they no longer know how much of it they believe and how much they have inherited whole. He built everything from nothing. He talks about it, about the people who helped him when he had nothing. He says that, he stopped. Something in the practiced cadence of the story broke slightly. He says that he has never forgotten the people who saw him when he wasn't anyone yet. Sophia was very still. She thought, I will not forget. She had heard those words this morning. She had heard them in Ada's voice, the voice of a woman who had taken them as a promise because she had meant them herself. And she had made the mistake that good people make, which is to assume that other people mean what they say with the same weight that they mean it. She looked at Marcus Harrington and she thought, your father said those exact words to your grandmother. And then he became Edwin Harrington, and Edwin Harrington forgot. She said, does your father say he's forgotten anyone? Marcus looked at her. He doesn't like to talk about. He stopped. Something in her face, not accusation, just the patient, settled waiting of someone who already knows more than the person speaking, made him stop. No, he said. He talks about the ones he's helped, the foundation, the scholarship programs, the hospital wing. He talks about, a pause, about what it means to pay things forward. Pay things forward, Sophia said. The phrase sat in the air between them. She had $43 from yesterday's tips. She had $11 in her account. She had given last night's soup to a woman whose former student had taken her house and called the transaction a gift. She said, Does he have anyone he should have paid back directly, before forward? Marcus looked at her. The question was very small and very specific, and it landed in the silence the way a stone lands in still water, with barely a sound, but with rings that keep going. I don't know what you mean, he said. I think you might, Sophia said. Not yet, but I think you might. She refilled his coffee. He didn't move. She sent him away eventually with her phone number written on a diner receipt. For your father, I'll not if he wants to contact me about the woman from yesterday, and she was not certain she was doing the right thing, and she was not certain she was doing the wrong thing either. She was doing the only thing available to her, which was to be a point of contact between two parts of a story that had been separated for too long. The diner filled and emptied and filled again. She carried things. She remembered things. She smiled at the regulars and asked about the specific things she knew to ask about. Gerald's daughter's school play, the couple by the window who had been trying to adopt for 3 years, Mrs. Petrov who came in every day at 2 for pie and stayed for an hour because she lived alone and the anchor was warm. At 4 o'clock during the first quiet of the afternoon, she went to the back office and called the apartment. And Ada answered on the second ring. Camille left me her horses, Ada said, to watch over while she's at Mrs. Okafor's. I've been watching them. How are they? Sleeping, Ada said. I believe they're dreaming. Something tightened in Sophia's chest, the particular tightening that happens when something is very nearly funny and very nearly breaking and lands in the precise overlap of the two. Ada, she said, the man from yesterday, Marcus, he came to the diner. A long silence. He said his father saw what happened, Sophia said. His father wants to know if you're all right. Another silence. Longer. Edwin, Ada said. Flat, quiet, the single word, a whole weather system. He doesn't know who you are, Sophia said. Marcus doesn't know. I don't think Edwin does either. That it was you, specifically. I think Marcus just saw an old woman and told his father, and Edwin. She stopped. I think Edwin may be trying to do the right thing without knowing what the right thing actually costs. The right thing, Ada said. The phrase carried something in it. Not quite bitterness, not quite grief, not quite the weary amusement of someone who has heard it before in all its hollow forms. Something more precise than any of those. The sound of a woman who was a mathematics teacher for 11 years and knows the difference between a correct answer and a correct method and can see clearly when someone has arrived at the former by abandoning the latter. Ada, Sophia said carefully, I need to ask you something. Ask. Marcus Harrington. Sophia said the name slowly. On Meridian Street yesterday. You said his name last night. Before you went to sleep. Was that? Did you know who he was? Did you recognize him? The silence this time was so long that Sophia checked the phone to make sure the call hadn't dropped. Then Ada said, I've seen his photograph. In newspapers. He looks like his grandfather did at that age. His grandfather, Sophia said. George, Ada said. My husband. Marcus has George's forehead and George's jaw, and I almost did not recognize them, because I was not expecting to find them on a street corner in that particular coat, kicking a bag. Sophia sat down. She sat down because her legs had decided, apparently, that standing was no longer an option. Ada, she said. Yes. Marcus Harrington is your grandson. Yes, Ada said, simply, without weight, without drama, without the performance of revelation, just the bare fact stated, is because that was what it was, a fact, something that was true regardless of how it was received. He doesn't know, Sophia said. No, Ada said. Edwin has not spoken my name in 3 years. I would be surprised if Marcus has ever heard it. What is your name? Sophia said. Your full name? Another pause. Adais, Ada said. Adais Harrington. I kept the name after George. It was the last thing I didn't let them take. A beat. He was a good man. George. He would have been very unhappy about all of this. Sophia sat in the back office of the Anchor Diner and looked at the wall, which had a calendar from 2 years ago on it that no one had taken down, and a list of phone numbers written in several different people's handwriting over many years. In a drawing Camille had done once on a slow Sunday afternoon that Sophia had brought in and taped there because she liked looking at it. A horse and a woman and something that might have been a diner or might have been a castle, with a legend underneath, in Camille's careful new letters. The world is good sometimes. She looked at it for a moment. Then she said, "What do you want to do?" "About what?" "About Edwin. About Marcus. About—" Sophia stopped. "About any of it. You don't have to do anything. You could stay on my couch and watch over Camille's horses, and I will never tell anyone anything. I mean that, if that's what you want." A very long pause, the longest yet. "No," Ada said. "That's not what I want." "What do you want?" Ada was quiet for a moment. Not hesitating, Sophia understood. Not uncertain. Gathering. The way a person gathers themselves before they say a true thing. The way you take a breath before you open a door you've been standing outside of for a very long time. "I want to look at my son," Ada said, "and have him look back. Not through lawyers. Not through a young woman at a desk. Not through Patricia's pity." A pause. "I want him to know what he did. And then I want to decide for myself what that means. Not in a courtroom, not in a newspaper, but in a room, face to face, the way people who owe each other things ought to settle them." Another pause, shorter. "I am 74 years old. I have been cold, and I have been ashamed, and I have been invisible, and I have been very, very tired. And I want, before I am done, to be seen." Sophia held the phone. The kitchen sounds filtered through the door. Gerald turned up something on the radio again. "Then we make that happen," Sophia said. "We?" Ada said. And there was something in it. Not surprise exactly. Not the surprise of why would you? Because she had seen over the course of a November night and a November morning exactly the kind of person Sophia Reyes was. More like the surprise of "you're still here. You're still in this." The recognition that the kindness had not been the gesture of the previous evening, but was something longer lasting, something that was still standing in the morning. "We," Sophia said, "unless you don't want company." A silence. Then, "No, yes, the company is—" A pause, the word chosen with care. "It is welcome." "Good," Sophia said. "I'll be home by 7. Don't let the horses wander." She worked the rest of her shift. She carried things and smiled at people and refilled coffee and ran Gerald's soup special until it sold out and wiped down the counter at 6:15 with the same focused mechanical efficiency as always, the same cloth, the same motion, the same 10,000 times before. But underneath all of it, she was thinking. She was thinking about the receipt in her apron pocket with her phone number on it. She was thinking about Edwin Harrington, whom she had never met, who had built an empire on the memory of people who had helped him when he had nothing, and who had called his own mother's claim on him. Confusion about the nature of a gift. She was thinking about what it meant that Marcus had come, that Edwin had sent him, that some small, a residual part of the Harrington conscience had looked out of a hotel window on a Tuesday afternoon and seen something it could not entirely put away. She was thinking about what it meant that a woman who had given everything she had spent 2 years and 4 months surviving a city without asking her own son for a single thing. Not because she couldn't, but because she had seen the version of Edwin that money made, and she had understood, with the particular understanding of a woman who had taught him how to think, exactly what she was worth to that version of him. She was thinking about Camille's horses, sleeping, about Ada watching over them. She was thinking about her mother's voice. "Pay attention. The whole world is people telling you who they are." Edwin Harrington was telling her who he was. He had been telling everyone, for years very loudly, in letters 18 inches high on hospital wings and scholarship endowments and foundation brochures. But people also told you who they were in the quiet ways, in the things they did when they thought they weren't being observed, in the calls they didn't take, in the names they stopped saying. At 6:58, as she was putting on her coat, her phone rang. An unknown number. City Exchange. She looked at it, picked up. "Ms. Reyes," a man's voice, older, measured, the voice of someone who has learned to sound calm as a professional skill. Speaking, she said. My name is Edwin Harrington, the voice said. I believe you may have information about a woman who was involved in an incident yesterday, near my hotel. I understand you may have spoken with my son. Sophia buttoned her coat. She took her bag from under the counter. Mr. Harrington, she said. I do. I would like very much to speak with you, he said. At your convenience. I will, of course. The offer of money coming. She could hear its shape forming in the pause. Compensate you for your time. That's not necessary, Sophia said. A pause. He had not expected that. I would like to meet, she said, but I'm going to need you to do something first. Of course, he said, too quickly, the reflex of a man who expected that things could be resolved by agreeing to them. Whatever you need. I need you to think, Sophia said, very carefully about whether there is anyone in your past whose name you have stopped saying, and I need you to be ready when we meet to say it again. A long silence on the other end. She walked out of the anchor into the dark and the cold, her coat collar up, her bag on her shoulder, her breath a small cloud in the November air. Good night, Mr. Harrington, she said. She hung up. Above her, the city burned its usual lights against the usual dark. Somewhere in an apartment on Clement Street, an old woman named Ada Z. Harrington was watching over a 4-year-old's horses and waiting for a morning that was beginning, now, to look like something different than all the other mornings. And Sophia Reyes walked home through the cold, thinking about what it costs to see someone, really see them, not the version that's convenient or manageable or safely at a distance, but the whole version, the full, true human fact of them. Her mother had known. Her mother had always known. She kept people in the front of her heart. Well, not the back. And the front is the part that is open to the world and takes the weather and the cold and the cost of it. Pay attention, her mother had said. The whole world is people telling you who they are. Tomorrow, Edwin Harrington was going to have to tell someone who he was, and someone was going to have to be there to hear it. She did not meet him at his hotel. That had been his first suggestion. Delivered through an assistant who called the following morning, efficient and pleasant and clearly accustomed to arranging things so that they happened on Edwin Harrington's terrain. A suite at the Harrington Grand coffee service. Whatever time was most convenient for Ms. Reyes. No, Sophia said. A brief pause. Mr. Harrington would be happy to arrange. I'm sure he would, Sophia said. Tell him to come to me. Another pause, longer. The pause of someone recalibrating for a response that had not been in the script. Could you give me an address? Sophia gave her the address on Clement Street, the apartment above the laundromat, second buzzer on the left. She hung up before the assistant could suggest an alternative. She told Ada that evening. They were at the kitchen table again. It had become, in 2 days, their table, the particular way that spaces become owned by the moments that happen in them. Camille was in bed. The string lights were on. Ada had her hands around her mug, and she was listening, and her face was doing something very controlled and very still. When Sophia finished, Ada said, He's coming here. Yes. To this apartment. Yes. Ada looked around the kitchen. At Camille's drawings on the refrigerator. At the bookshelf made of crates. At the rug over the bad part of the floor. At the place where she had slept 2 nights running and woken before dawn and watched the string lights and felt, for the first time in 2 years and 4 months, that she was somewhere rather than nowhere. All right, she said. Sophia looked at her. Are you sure? Ada set down the mug. She straightened her back, the gesture of a woman assembling herself, the deliberate, quiet act of preparation that has nothing to do with performance and everything to do with survival. I have been waiting 3 years, she said, to be in the same room with my son and have him see me. I am not going to begin asking for different rooms now. Sophia nodded. He may bring lawyers, Ada said. He may, Sophia said, but he won't. I don't think he's bringing lawyers to this apartment. Why not? Sophia thought about the phone call, about Edwin Harrington's voice, measured, careful, the voice of a man who had been composing himself in public for 40 years and was very good at it. And underneath it, something that was not composure, something that had heard the word name he stopped saying and had gone very quiet in a way that lawyers do not make people quiet. Because he already knows, Sophia said. He doesn't know he knows it yet, but he does. They came on Thursday morning at 9 o'clock. There were two of them. Edwin Harrington and Marcus. No assistant, no lawyer. Edwin had called the previous afternoon to confirm himself in person, not through the efficient young woman. He had said, "Just the two of us. Emma, if that's all right." And something in the "if that's all right," the asking, the conditional, the fact that he had bothered, had told Sophia something she needed to know. She buzzed them in. She heard them on the stairs. One set of footsteps, deliberate and slightly heavy. The gait of a 68-year-old man who had worked construction in his 20s and whose knees remembered it. One set lighter, faster, the gait of someone following not quite willingly, but not quite resisting either. She opened the door before they knocked. Edwin Harrington was not what she had expected, though she could not have said what she had expected. He was tall, taller than Marcus, taller than she had imagined for a man constructed so completely in her mind from his effects rather than his person. He was gray-haired and broad-shouldered, and his face had the quality of a face that had once been handsome, and was now something better than handsome. Specific, lived in, the kind of face that knows its own history. He was wearing a plain dark coat, no convoy, no bodyguard. He looked standing in the stairwell of an apartment building on Clement Street, exactly like a man who had grown up not far from here and had never quite stopped knowing how to stand in buildings like this one, even when he had spent 40 years learning to stand in other kinds. He looked at Sophia. "Miss Reyes," he said. "Come in," she said. Marcus came in behind him. He looked at the apartment, not dismissively, she noticed. He looked at it the way he had looked at her in the diner. The look of someone who was beginning, slowly and not comfortably, to see things differently than they had been accustomed to seeing them. Sophia closed the door. Edwin stood in the small hallway, and his eyes moved through the apartment, and they stopped. Ada was sitting at the kitchen table. She had dressed carefully, not in anything new because she had nothing new, but in the cleanest and most particular arrangement of what she had. Her hair was pinned. Her hands were folded on the table in front of her. She was sitting with her back straight and her chin at the particular angle that Sophia had come to recognize as the angle of a woman who had decided, many years ago, that dignity was not a luxury, but a discipline. She was looking at her son. Edwin Harrington went very still. The apartment was very quiet. Outside, the city continued. A bus, someone's music from a lower floor, and the particular hum of an ordinary Thursday morning that had no idea what was happening inside it. "Mama," Edwin said. It was barely a word. It was the sound underneath a word. The structure of it stripped of everything, except the fact that it was being said at all. He said it the way a man says a word he has not said in 3 years, and discovers, in the saying of it, that his mouth still knows the shape. Ada said nothing. Marcus looked from his father to the old woman at the table and back again. Something was moving in his face. A processing, a reckoning, the specific expression of a person connecting two things that had been kept deliberately separate and feeling the ground shift as they connect. "Dad," Marcus said, his voice careful, uncertain, a voice Sophia had not heard from him before. "Oh, who is she?" Edwin did not answer immediately. He was looking at Ada, at her hands on the table, at the coat on the hook by the door. The man's coat, 3 sizes too large, worn through at the elbows, at the canvas bag beside it. "This is your grandmother," Edwin said. The silence that followed was the kind that takes up physical space. Marcus looked at Ada. Ada looked at Marcus. And for a moment, just a moment, something moved in Ada's face that was not anger and not accusation and not the performed sorrow of a woman wanting to be pitied. It was something more devastating than any of those. It was recognition. The simple, unmanageable fact of looking at the forehead and jaw of a man you loved for 50 years and finding them, slightly reordered, on the face of a 31-year-old who left you on a cold pavement and walked away. "Fee on Meridian Street," Marcus said. Not a question. The arrival at a fact, the specific sickness of it landing. "Yes," Ada said. One word, quiet, complete. Edwin sat down. He sat down the way a man sits when his legs have decided independently of his intentions that standing is not tenable. He pulled out the chair across from Ada, and he sat in it, and he put his hands on the table, and he looked at his mother. She looked back. The two of them in Sophia's kitchen, at Sophia's table, with Camille's drawings on the refrigerator and the rug over the bad part of the floor. Edwin Harrington, 68 years old, worth more than could be usefully imagined, who had a wing of a hospital and a foundation for educational excellence in a name on buildings. And Ada, 80s Harrington, 74, who had a canvas bag and a borrowed coat in 2 years and 4 months of managing, and who had kept his name even when he stopped saying hers. "How long?" Edwin said. His voice was not the managed voice from the phone. It was something stripped back, something that had been in storage for a long time and was now just air. "How long have you been?" 2 years and 4 months, Ada said. She said it the same way she had said it to Sophia at the kitchen table on Wednesday morning, as a fact, without theater. "But the last 3 months have been harder." Edwin closed his eyes. He kept them closed for long enough that Sophia, standing in the kitchen doorway, because this was not her table anymore, this was theirs, looked away. Some things are not meant to be witnessed directly. They are meant to be given space. But she looked at Camille's drawing on the wall. The world is good sometimes. She looked at it and let Edwin Harrington have whatever was happening behind his closed eyes in private. When he opened them, he looked at Ada and said, "I told myself you were being looked after." "I know," Ada said. "I told myself the lawyers had." "I know," Ada said. Again, quiet, not cutting him off, simply answering, because she did know, because she had understood every mechanism of it. The self-protection, the justification, the comfortable fiction of a man who needed his conscience and his ambition to coexist and had found a way to manage the negotiation between them. She had taught him how to think. She knew exactly how he had thought his way into this. "I was wrong," Edwin said. The words fell into the room like stones into water. Simple, heavy, without the legal language, without the lawyerly softening. Just the fact of it, stated, because it was the only thing left to say. Ada looked at him. Marcus had not moved. He was standing near the wall with his hands at his sides and his face doing something Sophia had not seen it do before. Being young. Not the composure, not the authority, not the coat and the watch, and the flat certainty of a man accustomed to being in charge of his own image. Just young and wrong, and knowing it, and not knowing where to put it. "Grandmother," he said. The word came out slightly broken. "On the street. I didn't." "No," Ada said. "You didn't. I would never have." "I know," Ada said. "That is the point, Marcus." She looked at him, directly, completely. How did the way a teacher looks at a student who has given a wrong answer and needs to understand not just that it is wrong, but why the wrongness matters. "You would never have done it if you had known who I was." That is not a comfort. That is the problem. A pause. The question is never whether you would harm someone you recognize. The question is what you do with someone you don't. The kitchen was very quiet. "Your grandfather," Ada said, "would have stopped for anyone. That was the man he was." Marcus looked at the floor. Edwin looked at his hands. Sophia put the kettle on. She did it because something needed to happen with her hands, and because the kettle was there, and because her mother had taught her that the making of tea was one of the things you could do when there was nothing to be done. Not to fix anything, but to give people somewhere to put their attention while the real thing settled. She made 4 cups. She put them on the table. She sat down because Ada's eyes had found her and said without words, "Stay." She stayed. Edwin wrapped his hands around his cup the way Ada always wrapped hers. The same gesture, the same two-handed hold. And Sophia noticed it and said nothing and stored it away. "What do you need?" Edwin said. He said it to Ada, but he was looking at Sophia, and the look was the look of a man who understood, suddenly and completely, that the person who had done the thing he had not done, who had stopped, who had crouched down, who had brought his mother in from the cold, was this 26-year-old woman in a diner apron who had no particular reason to do any of it and had done all of it. "Anna, I'm not the one to answer that," Sophia said. "She is." He looked back at Ada. Ada looked at her son for a long time, at the gray at his temples, at the way he sat, which was the way he had sat in her classroom at 17. Forward slightly, the posture of someone paying attention. She had never fully let go of the 17-year-old. Even in the worst of it, even when the lawyers called and the house sold and Patricia closed the door, even then, she had not fully let go of the boy who came to her classroom after school and learned to see the angle a problem was hiding from you. I want my name back, she said. Not in a courtroom, not in a newspaper, just mine, acknowledged. I want what I gave you acknowledged as what it was. Edwin nodded. I want somewhere to live, she said. Not grand, not a gift, an arrangement. It's something I know will still be there when I wake up in the morning. A pause. And I want, she stopped. The word she wanted was something she had not said in 3 years, something she had not allowed herself to want, because wanting it had become too expensive. She said it now, carefully, the way you say something you are not certain you have the right to anymore. I want to see you, sometimes, not performing, not in a boardroom, just, she looked at him, just as people, as what we are to each other. Edwin's jaw moved. He was holding something very tightly in his face, and the holding of it was visible in the particular way of a man who does not cry easily and has not cried in a very long time and is currently making a decision about it. He made the decision. He lowered his head and he let it go. He did not cry the way men cry in films. He cried the way men cry in real life, quietly, briefly, with the particular economy of someone for whom it is not a common occurrence and who therefore does not know quite what to do with it. He kept his hands around the mug. He let his head stay down for perhaps 30 seconds. Then he raised it, and he looked at his mother, and he said the thing that needed to be said, and that no lawyer could say for him, and that no signed document could contain. I'm sorry, Mama. I should have come home. Ada looked at him, and something in her face, the last held thing, the last locked thing, the thing she had been carrying with the quiet discipline of a woman who would not be seen to break, moved, not collapsed, not shattered, moved. The way a door moves when someone who has been outside for a long time finally turns the handle and finds it unlocked. Yes, she said. You should have. Marcus put his cup down. He stood up. He looked at his grandmother. At this small, precise woman with the straight spine and the articulate hands, who had watched him on a Tuesday afternoon without revealing herself, who had been kicking distance from him while he stood on a pavement and decided the world had been inconvenienced by her presence. He looked at Sophia. What you did, he said. His voice was different now. Not the voice of the hotel lobby, not the diner counter. Something smaller and more real. Taking her in, feeding her, just... He stopped. Why did you do that? Sophia looked at him. The patient, its direct look that her mother had passed down to her like bone structure. Because she needed it, Sophia said. And I could. He looked at her for a long moment. You didn't know who she was. No, Sophia said. That's not why you do things. He sat back down. The practical things happened over the following weeks, and they happened without spectacle. Edwin Harrington's lawyers, different lawyers, ones whose job was to correct rather than to protect, worked with remarkable speed when their client provided specific and unambiguous instructions. A formal acknowledgement, signed and witnessed, of the nature of the original transaction. A sum transferred, not with interest, which Ada had refused, but whole and clean and without condition, into an account in Ada's name. A lease signed on a 2-bedroom apartment 6 blocks from Clement Street in Ada's name for as long as she wanted it. There was no press release. Edwin had wanted to make a public statement, some form of it, something that would enter the record, because he was a man accustomed to public statements and to the way they ordered things. Ada had said no. She had said, what happened between us is between us. The world doesn't need to watch me be repaid for you to understand that repaying me was the right thing. He had listened. He had not argued. The 17-year-old who had learned to hear when a teacher corrected him was still in there. It turned out he had not been entirely lost, only buried, the way things get buried under years of accumulation, under money and ambition and the constant hum of success that drowns out everything beneath it. He came back on a Sunday 3 weeks later without calling. He knocked on Ada's new door with 2 cups of coffee from a place down the street, and Ada opened the door and looked at him for a moment, and then stepped aside to let him in. They sat for 2 hours. Sophia didn't know what they talked about. She would never know. That part of the story belonged to them. Marcus came to the Anchor on a Tuesday. Not the same Tuesday, another one, a different kind. He sat at the counter and ordered coffee and said after a long time, "I want to do something. I don't know what. I don't know how." Sophia poured his coffee. "Then start with something small," she said, "and do it for someone who isn't watching." He looked at her. That's all?" "That's everything," she said. She didn't know if he listened. She didn't know if it took. Some seeds go into ground that isn't ready for them, and you never see what happens. Some seeds wait a very long time, and then something changes in the soil and they go. She had done what she could. She had crouched down. She had said here, and then come in, and then she had stayed. She had kept staying through the morning and the evening and the phone call and the meeting and the tea and the afterward. She had stayed because it was what her mother would have done and what her mother had taught her to do, and because it was, when you stripped everything else away, the only thing that had ever actually worked. Ada moved into the apartment on Clement Street in early December. On the first morning in her new place, she woke before dawn, as she always did, as she always would, and sat at her own kitchen table with her hands around her own mug and looked at the window and the city beginning to gather its light. She thought about George, who would have been very unhappy about all of it, and then very relieved and then insufferably pleased that she had managed. She thought about the Anchor diner, which smelled of hash browns and dish soap and 40 years of people being warm. She thought about a 26-year-old woman who had crouched on a cold pavement and said here, just that one word, quiet, not asking permission, and about what that one word had moved in the world. She picked up the phone. She called Sophia. It rang twice. "It's 6 in the morning," Sophia said, in the voice of someone who was awake and had been awake but was going to say this anyway. "I know," Ada said. "How are the horses?" A pause, a sound that was almost a laugh. "Sleeping," Sophia said. "Camille says they're dreaming about a field." "A field," Ada said. "Yes, that sounds right." She looked out her window. The city was doing what the city always does, moving, building, being indifferent to the enormous things happening inside it. She had spent 2 years and 4 months watching it from the outside, from the cold edge of it, and now she was inside it again, and the inside felt different than she remembered it, softer somehow and harder at the same time, more real. "Sophia," she said. The thing your mother told you, about paying attention." A pause. "Yes." "She was right," Ada said. "That's all." She was exactly right. And this is what Mama always knew. She knew it before any of us were old enough to understand it. She knew it in kitchens, in small apartments, in the in-between spaces where nobody is watching and the choice is just yours, plain and private, and everything depends on it. She knew that the world does not notice the quiet ones. It does not stop for them, does not landmark them, does not put their names on buildings. The woman who crouches down in the cold gets no photograph. No one writes about the soup heated on a Tuesday stove or the spare key laid by the front door. No one marks the moment a stranger is told come in, no drama in it, just the open door and the warm room on the other side. But the world feels it. It moves because of it, not loudly, not all at once. But the way ground shifts when water finds the right seam, quietly and then with consequences that take years to fully arrive. The way one ordinary woman in a diner apron crouches down in the cold and says a single word and thereby sets in motion the meeting of a mother and her son and the reckoning of a 31-year-old man with the bottom of his own character and the future of a 4-year-old girl who grows up knowing that the world is sometimes good and knowing why it is sometimes good because her mother showed her, because her mother's mother told her, because some truths travel down through women like water through stone, slow and patient, and arriving eventually at the place they were always meant to reach. Sophia Reyes never told anyone what she had done. Not boastfully, not privately. While she didn't think of it as a thing she had done, She thought of it as a Tuesday. Camille grew up knowing the story. She knew it the way children know the stories that live in their houses. Not as history, but as weather, as something that is simply the atmosphere of the place where you learn to be yourself. She knew that one November, her mother had crouched on a cold pavement and said, "Here," and that the world had changed because of it, slowly, quietly, in all the ways that matter. She raised her own children by it, and somewhere that was enough. Somewhere in the deep logic of things, in the place where the quiet accounts are settled, where the patient seeds eventually find their soil, that was exactly enough. Mom always said, kindness given always finds its way back. Not because the world is fair, or not because goodness is rewarded by some neat and watchful hand, but because the people who truly see you, who crouch down in the cold and say here without calculating what it will cost them, those people change what is possible. And what is possible, once changed, does not go back. It doesn't go back. Thank you for sitting with this story all the way to the end. Mama always said the people who stay for the whole story are the ones who understand it. If it moved you, I think you'll find the other videos on your screen are waiting to do the same. And if you haven't subscribed yet, come home. There's always a story waiting at Mama Told Me.